Hello friends, welcome to the Mandalorian Paint at Home. Today I'm so excited to do this painting with you. So let's make sure we have everything set up and ready to go. We've got our water half full. We've also got our color palette opened and ready to go. I've got silver, black, dark gray, light gray, crimson, and gold. I've also got my paint brushes. I've got my large square brush, a tiny round brush, and a smaller square brush with my blue towel in case I need that to clean off my brushes. And then I've got my pre-sketched canvas. So let's get started. I'm going to start with this large square brush. So today we're going to start by laying down the background sky of the Mandalorian in that famous scene where he's got the two suns in the background, this gorgeous kind of gold desert and this crimson sky in the background. So I'm going to start by wetting just the bristles of my brush and kind of dragging those across the edge of my cup to get rid of any drips of water that I might have. Then I'm going to go over to my gold paint that I've got, and I'm going to pick up just a little bit of paint on both sides of my paintbrush, just at the very tip of my paintbrush, so that way I'm not overloaded with paint. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to start on the edges of the canvas and work my way all the way up to the very top of the weapon on the Mandalorian. Moving side to side, I'm going to take my brush and moving left to right, I'm going to start to lay down the background sky for our painting. I'm just going to move that out of the way. So this really pretty gold color is going to go right over the inside sketch marks that we have, and that's okay. I'm not really concerned about that because once we put the other acrylic color over it, it's going to cover up that painting. That acrylic color that's already gone over it, it's going to cover it right up. So I'm going to go all the way to the top of this weapon. And as I'm working, I want to make sure that I get the side edges. So when it hangs on the wall, I've got this really pretty wrapped canvas. So I just want a thin, transparent coat of gold. I'm going to grab just a little tiny bit more water and a little bit more gold paint. And I want to make sure I get this little spot right here that's between the weapon and the neck of the Lego piece, because that's also the background. I'm going to move over to the opposite side of the canvas. I know I'm going to work from the shoulder of the Mandalorian all the way up to where the top of the weapon would be on the other side. And I'm going to lay down that gold paint, that really pretty desert background, and just moving side to side. So as I'm working, I want to make sure that I press down into the canvas and I'm pushing out all of the raised paint, making sure that there isn't any clumps of paint on the canvas. I want to make sure that all of the paint dries evenly. Again, I want to make sure I hit the side edge. All right, great job. So now that we've got that desert laid down in the background, at this time, if you'd like it to be a little bit darker, you can go back and add a second coat. But we still want to make sure we see the pencil marks in the background. So I can take a few seconds and show you what that would look like. So I'm going to add a little bit more water. I'm going to add just a little bit more gold paint, and if I'd like a few spots on the canvas to be a little bit darker with that metallic gold, now's the time to do that. We want to do that before all of the paint has a time to set up and dry. So I'm going to come back and add one more layer of the gold while the canvas is still a little bit wet. Just a little bit on the front on both sides. Again, making sure that I can still see that pencil mark that I've pressed down any large clumps of paint because I want this to dry nice and even. Right, fantastic. All right, so let's move on to our next color. I'm going to use the exact same brush that I've been using, and I'm going to move over to this really gorgeous crimson color. So that's going to be the top part of our sky for our Mandalorian painting. I'm going to take just the very tip of the bristles again and tap them into the water. I'm going to grab a little bit of this crimson color on the tip of my brush. So you can see I don't have a lot of paint on the brush. I want to start with a very light coat. I'm going to start part way into the gold. So instead of starting right on top of the gold, I'm going to start just underneath the gold line so it has a chance to blend together. And I'm going to start to put down this first layer of crimson sky. So I'm moving my brush back and forth, getting all of this crimson paint off of the brush. So I've got a nice transparent coat. So I'm starting to see a little bit of the white from the canvas in the background. So I've got a nice pale color. I'm going to lift the canvas up and very carefully hit that side edge. So right now I've got a really soft color. I'm going to come over to the other side of the helmet and using the same technique, a little bit of water and a little bit of paint. I'm going to come part way into the gold and moving back and forth. I'm going to continue to work that transparent crimson sky, and I'm going to hit the side edge of my canvas as well. So again, I'm not worried about the paint going into the part that's already been sketched out. When that dries and we put the other acrylic color on, it's going to cover that up and we won't see where we went over the lines. All right, so for the last part of the sky, I want it to show that it's a little bit darker, a little bit more mysterious. So instead of going into the water, I'm going to just go straight into the crimson paint. Again, I'm just using a little bit of color on both sides of the brush because I don't want to have too much clumps of paint or too much raised paint on the canvas, and just moving from left to right, pressing hard into the canvas. I'm going to start to add a layer of that deep red, just blending it back and forth. So I'm pressing really hard into the canvas, using up all that paint on my brush. I'm going to add some more crimson paint to help me deepen up that sky. So here we'll go through quite a bit more paint than we did when we added the water. Again, I'm going to make sure I hit the sides of the canvas. And I'm using nice long lines so the sky looks like it goes on forever. And my last step for the sky is going to be to get this very top edge of the canvas. So let's not forget about that. We have everything else painted on the sides. So let's make sure we get this very top edge as well. Alright, so I'm going to take a look, make sure I've got all the paint on the canvas that I want, because once this is dried, I don't want to go back in the background and add more color. It'll be extremely hard to blend it and make it look really, really beautiful. So once this background is done, we're done with the background and we're going to rinse this brush off. So let me show you a great way to rinse off your brushes that's really kind of mess free. I'm going to take my brush over to the water and I'm going to set it where the bristles are down at the bottom of the cup, and I'm going to press down hard and give the brush a little bit of a scrub at the bottom of the brush, at the cup, excuse me. And then I'm going to flip the brush over, I'm going to press it down hard at the bottom of the cup, and I'm going to give it a little bit of a scrub. And I'm going very gentle, just kind of agitating the brush a little bit. I want to be careful that I don't spill the water over the sides, because I don't want to get any water on my canvas or in my paints. Then I'll take that amazing blue towel, set my brush in the blue towel, and then give it a little bit of a squeeze between my fingers, and then the brush comes out nice and clean, and I don't have any messes. So our next step is going to be to do the silver on the Mandalorian. So we are going to switch to a small square brush. So this will be for the majority of our painting, and I really like the small square brush. It helps me get into a lot of details and it's really great to paint with. The silver is going to take 2 coats of paint. So when we put that first layer on, don't be alarmed if you can still see some color through it. We'll put the first coat down and then we'll come back and put a second coat of paint down. As with all of the painting that we've done, we want to make sure that we use a nice smooth coat of paint. If you have any raised paint, make sure you smooth out any lumps of paint because we want it to dry nice and even. Alright, so we're going to start with the 2 shoulders of the Mandalorian and this cool little breastplate armor on the Mandalorian. So I'm going to take my square brush. I'm just going to tap both sides into the silver paint. Just picking up a little bit of color on both sides. I try not to pick up too much paint on my brushes because it kind of globs everywhere. So I'm going to paint both shoulders and the breastplate. And remember, this first layer of silver is very transparent, so you'll be able to see some of that gold color through the background. But we will come back and put a second coat on, and that second coat really hides any imperfections that you see in the background. I'm also going to take the shoulder all the way down to the bottom of the canvas and paint that silver as well. I'm going to move over to the other side. And very carefully, I'm going to follow that shoulder right down to the bottom of the canvas. Again, just adding that first coat. Of silver paint. Right, now I'm going to go on to the armor on this chest plate of the Mandalorian. So if you're familiar with the series, like most series that are on television or on Netflix and Amazon Prime, most characters have some type of costume change or outfit change, or if they're a warrior, have an upgrade to their costumes. And the Mandalorian had also a change to the way that the character looks in the series. And so I chose this minifig character because of all of this metallic silver that's in it. And painting with the metallic paints are so rewarding. They're a little bit more transparent. You'll see as we get to like the dark gray and the black. Their metallics are a little bit more of a transparent paint, but they are so neat when you're done with them because they just really shine when you hang them on your wall. And also, I really liked this different change to the look of the Mandalorian that happened in the series. And in case you're wondering, I will not give away any spoilers in the movie series, or so you don't have to worry about that. So again, I'm going to bring that silver right around to the bottom. So the picture just continues right around to the bottom of your canvas. And you'll see the lines there for that. So what happens if you accidentally put paint in a spot where it's not meant to be? That is a great question. You can let it dry and then go over that spot with the correct color paint, and it'll cover up the old color. So the only color that's hard to do with are some of the darker colors like the reds and the blacks. All right, so we have the shoulders done, we have the chest plate done, we left the strap alone, that's gonna be a different color. So now let's go up to his helmet. All right, we have on the sides of his helmet 3 lines right over here. So we have the outside long line, the next line in right here is going to be silvered. So if I count kind of these long pieces, I would count 1, 2, and then 3 right here. This one right here in the middle is going to be silver. So I'm going to use the exact same brush that I've been using, but instead of using the flat side, I'm going to come up and I'm going to paint right on the edge of my brush. So I'm going to grab a little bit of silver and I'm going to paint this middle section right here. So again, this is going to take 2 coats of paint. All right, so it's pretty transparent, so you'll be able to see those colors in the background. but we'll be putting another layer of paint on that, and it'll really help to define that color a little bit more. So we have our 3 lines, 1, 2, 3, and right here on the bottom, this is also going to be silver. So I'm going to go ahead and paint that now. Great job. If we look over on the other side of his mask, instead of having 3 lines, we're only going to have 2 lines because his head is turned slightly. So we'll see that we have 1, 2. So I'm still going to use my square brush and painting with the edge. And if this gets a little bit difficult, of course you can switch to that round brush. Painting with the edge, I'm going to use the silver. And again, not the first line, but the second line in. Oh, excuse me, my apologies. This first line in, right next to his weapon, this one is going to be our silver line on the helmet. So because his head is turned, we don't see that outside line. So this would be the second line. This would be the matching line. My apologies if that was a little bit confusing. Then we skip a line, and this first little arc right here is also going to be silver. So it's the same matching side as the one we just painted. Great job. All right, and the final silver piece that we're going to paint on our Mandalorian is the very top dome of his helmet. So if you look right in the middle, we have a T shape, and then above the T shape, we have the dome of the helmet, or the top part of the helmet. This entire top piece is going to be painted silver. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to follow this bottom line straight across. And as I'm painting, that's going to help me know not to come down and paint in this T area and keep everything above that line. I also like to use the straight flat side of my brush to help me outline the dome on the head. when I paint, I'll usually do the outline of what I'm painting if it's a big area. So this is a larger area, so what I'll do is I'll generally outline what I'm painting and then I'll fill everything in. Alright, so as I'm working on this, the same type of idea that we've been working on is I'm looking for any raised areas of paint and making sure that those are smoothed out so it dries nice and even, because I want to make sure that I can come and put a second coat of paint. I'm trying to use nice long brush strokes so the paint stays nice and even. And not too much paint at first because it will take a long time to dry. All right, so now that I've got that layer on the top, I can come back down to the bottom, and if I tap it with my finger, I can see that because I used a nice even coat, that my silver has dried up at the bottom and on the sides here. And by the time I add my second coat, the top should be dry as well. So I'm going to come back over to my silver, and the second coat goes on quite a bit easier than the first coat did. So as I start to add on my second coat, that silver really starts to pop out. So we all tend to paint a little bit different. Some people use more paint on their brush, some people use less. So after you put the second coat on, if you still see a lot of color in the background, let it dry completely. Finish your entire project. Let your entire project dry completely, and then come back and you can add one more layer of silver paint on. And the reason why we want to let it dry completely is we don't want to go over it with a third coat of paint and accidentally peel off the paint that we've already put on the canvas. Sometimes if we keep adding wet paint on wet paint, we can just start to peel off the layers that are underneath instead of, doing more good and covering up any flaws, which was our intention. So if you want to add one more coat of paint, if it's just not covering up like you'd like it to, then let's finish your entire project. Make sure that your silver paint is completely dry, and then you can come back and add one more coat of paint to it. Alright, so I'm starting my second coat, making sure that I get the bottom of the canvas as well. And the second coat goes on so much faster than the first coat does. I'm going to come back over to the side and the side of the front of his helmet. And if these smaller areas are hard to paint, of course you can switch to that small round brush. Just make sure you rinse it out really, really good. going to move over to the other side and put my second coat on. And then finally I'm going to go back up to the very top, and I'm going to add the second layer on the top. So if you have any questions about what type of paint that I use or the brushes that I use, you can always send me an email and I'll be happy to answer those questions in an email for you, so you can find these supplies if you like them and you want to continue to paint with them. All right, great job. So I'm going to rinse this brush out so we can use it again later. I'm going to take it to the bottom of the cup and just agitate it on the bottom of the cup, just scrubbing it back and forth, being really careful that the water again doesn't spill out on the sides. I'm taking my blue towel. I'm just going to give it a squeeze, get rid of that excess water, and I'm going to set it to the side. Alright, I'm going to grab our cute little tiny round brush, and the next part of the Mandalorian that I'm going to do is this light gray section. So if we look from this chest plate, this armor that he has, counting our way up, we have 1, 2, 3, 4 layers to his armor. This back layer is his cape. This next layer coming down, that's attached to his arms. This is the layer that's going to be painted in light gray. So this very back layer is his cape, which is dark gray. The one right here that attaches to his shoulders is going to be light gray. So I'm going to use this round brush. I'm going to go into my light gray paint, and I'm going to start to paint this layer right next to his shoulder in this light gray. And I'm also going to take that color all the way down right to the bottom of the canvas. I'm going to follow it right around. There we go. Grabbing a little bit more color. I'm going to go all the way across. I'm going to pick up my canvas and I'm going to bring this color all the way down to the bottom as well. So this is the last time we're going to use this light gray for a while, so I'm going to rinse out my brush. And I'm going to dry it off. I'm going to switch back to my square brush, my small square brush, and then we're going to switch over to this dark gray color. And now things are really going to start to pop off of our canvas and our Mandalorian's really going to start to come to life. So with our layers on his uniform that he has, we have the chest plate, then we have the layer that's right above that, and then we have this dark cape. I'm going to start with this background dark cape. So I'm going to come over to my dark gray and I'm going to paint this back layer where his cape is. And I always love it when really good characters have some type of cape that they get to wear. I just think it's so cool when there's an epic scene and their cape is billowing in the background. Alright, again, I'm going to lift up the canvas and make sure that his cape wraps all the way down to the bottom, so when it hangs on the wall, I can really see what's going on. Three, two, one. So again, if you're painting and you find that you like using the small round brush a little bit better, of course you can use that one. Just make sure you rinse this brush out and set it aside so we can use it again. Now the last part in the dark gray for his bottom part of his uniform here is going to be right here, but we want to be careful not to get the strap. So I'm going to come back into the dark gray. Moving right across. I'm going to paint this space in dark gray and just be really careful about a strap. Again, if you go a little bit into a strap, that's okay because we're going to paint that black. And anything that you do get dark gray is going to be covered right up by the black. I'm going to be very careful and I'm going to lift the canvas up and I'm going to continue right around to the very bottom of the canvas with the dark gray. Same thing. This is the last part for right now that needs to wrap around under the canvas until we do the shoulder strap. Great job. Some of those parts in there were a little tricky. So wonderful work. I'm going to switch brushes just for a minute. So I'm going to set this in the water, give it a rinse back and forth, give it a little squeeze in the towel and just set it aside for a minute. I'm going to come back to that. But I'm going to come to the side areas with my little round brush, and I'm using the dark gray. And I want to be really careful because this bottom part is wet. I don't want to drag my arm across. I'm going to come up and I'm going to do this one side long line in dark gray. So now we're going to start to do the sides of this helmet. And he's really going to start to come to life. So we have the dark gray, the silver, and then this piece that we've left right between the two silver right here, that's also going to be dark gray. So I'm going to grab a little bit of paint at the end of the brush. I'm going to start from the bottom and I'm going to work my way up. Again, I want to be really careful about any wet paint that's already on the canvas. And I'm still using that little tiny round brush. Great job. These little pieces are a little bit more challenging to paint. But I love that once we start to put these darker colors on, everything starts to pop and come to life. Over on the other side, we've got silver and silver. Right between here is also going to be dark gray. Great, beautiful job. That's a little area that's quite challenging to paint right there. I'm going to rinse out my brush and I'm going to switch back to the square brush. I'm going to stick with the dark gray paint, and if I look up from the sides of this helmet, I've got 1, 2, 3 areas, and then I've got the T on his helmet. I'm going to come right 1, 2, 3 in this area right here and straight across from it. So I'm going to put a little bit of paint so you can see which areas I'm talking about. Those 2 areas are also going to be dark gray. So let's go ahead and paint those now. And again, you can switch between the square brush and you can continue using the round brush if that helps you get into some of the smaller corners. Whatever brush works the best for you to get the best painting. Dark gray is such a smooth color compared to the metallics. Wonderful. When we're done, I'm going to rinse this brush out and then we're going to switch to black. And once we start putting the black on this painting, everything is really going to start to pop, come to life. So finally we get to black. Black has been waiting over here in the corner for us throughout the entire painting, but I generally like to put the light colors down first and then save the darkest colors for last because those are the hardest to cover up if we go outside of the lines. So black is really, really nice because it's going to be one of those colors where if I kind of went outside the lines here, it's going to clean everything up for me. So the parts on our Mandalorian that are black are going to be our strap, our weapon, the neck of the Mandalorian, this really cool center T section, and then the two side cheek areas on his helmet. So again, we've got the strap, the weapon, the neck, the T section, and the two side cheeks. So once we start painting the neck into the T section, they both get separated because they're the same color, but we're going to define those again when we do our highlights. So let's go ahead and paint in the rest of the white areas of the painting in black. And again, you can switch between the two brushes, between the square brush and the round brush. Whichever of the two brushes work the best to help you get in all of those different details. When I come to any big sections of painting, I like to use a square brush because I like to use the side edge of the brush to help me make that nice outline as I'm going around in the paint. That's kind of my tip that I like to give. So I'm really excited to start this color and see how this is really going to start to come to life. So I'm going to start with this weapon up here, because this part for me is one of my favorites to paint, because I like to use the edge of the brush to help me get that line. So with any of your paints, as we're going along today in our painting, if you see the canvas through the background, let your paint dry, and then you can come back and add a second coat and touch-ups at the end of the painting. but we definitely want to make sure that that first layer has dried. Every now and then this black color will take a second coat of paint, just depending on what we're painting. So sometimes if it's a big area, every now and then you can see the canvas through the background. We just want to make sure it dries completely. So I'm going to come right underneath the side of this helmet. And come up on the edge of my brush, and then using the side of my brush, I'm going to come in really close to the top of his cape. Same idea though, I'm still smoothing out any raised paint that I may have, because I want to make sure that it sets and it dries very, very even. Next I'm going to go over to the T-section on his helmet, and I'm going to save this little bit for last because I don't want to accidentally rub my hand across it and then get black all over my painting. So I'm coming right down into the neck of the Mandalorian. And you can see we kind of lose that pencil mark between the two, but we're going to come back and do some highlights and we'll redefine that area. And this part of the painting for me is so satisfying once we get this dark color on. Because it really starts to bring everything together and hide the rest of the white parts on the canvas. And it really gives us that contrast that we need. Alright, so I think for this little area over here, I'm going to switch to this small round brush, just because it's a little bit tighter area to paint right there. So while I have this large square brush, I'm going to go back and see if there's any areas that I need a little bit more paint. So in just a second, I'm going to switch over to the smaller round brush, just because it's a little bit easier for me to get into that little tiny area. This black is a very loose paint. It's not a very thick paint, so it spreads really nice. So it tends to dry really, really quick. Okay, so I'm going to rinse the square brush out. We're going to use the square brush one last time when we do the two moons in the background. So we want to make sure that we rinse it out really, really good. We don't want any black left in the brush. I'm going to set that aside. I'm going to switch to my round brush. And I'm going to use this round brush for this one side detail. Just a little bit easier for me to get this tiny spot on the side. I'm going to do the strap. And then one last time I'm going to lift the camera and get the strap that wraps underneath on the bottom. I'm going to rinse this brush out once I'm done with all of the black on my canvas. And we're going to use this brush to do some highlights. I cleaned all the black paint off of this little round brush, so now I'm going to hold it where the gold meets the blue, just like a pen or a pencil, as if I'm getting to write something down on paper. I'm going to take this brush and I'm going to dip the end of it in a little bit of water, just so it's moist to the touch, and I'm going to grab a little bit of black paint. Just a tiny bit at the very end of the brush. And now I'm going to start to add some details to our Mandalorian. I'm going to start with the shoulders of the Mandalorian, and just like I was using this as a pen or a pencil, I'm going to start at the very top of the shoulder and make one line from the top down to the side. So once I put the brush down on the canvas, I'm going to make one continuous line without lifting up my brush. just like that. So between the water and the paint and holding the brush like a pencil, I'll be able to make one really nice line on the canvas. I'm going to go back over to my water. I'm going to grab just a tiny bit of water, just enough to break the very, very surface of the top of the water. I'm going to grab a tiny bit of black paint on the tip of my brush. I'm going to come over to my other shoulder and be really careful because some of your painting might still be a little bit wet, so if you want to let it dry first and then come back and do this, you can. We're going to do the same thing for the other shoulder. So I'm going to put my brush on the canvas in one continuous motion. I'm going to add definition to that shoulder. And then if you'd like to, you can continue that line all the way down to the bottom of your painting. So that's really going to define his arms and separate them from the cape and really help them pop out, start to make them look three-dimensional. Next, we're going to do all of the lines that are between the chest plate and the cape. So this is where all of the material looks like it's tucked into this armor or this chest plate. So on the side, we're going to give him two lines that follow the direction of the shoulder strap. So I'm going to break the surface of the water with my brush. I'm going to grab a little bit of black paint, just a little tiny bit, and I'm going to add two lines, 1, 2, side by side, parallel lines. On the other side of the shoulder strap, going the same direction, right between this V mark and the shoulder strap right here, I'm going to add 2 more lines. 1, 2. So I did not go back and add more paint to my brush because now I should have plenty of paint on my brush. If your brush got a little bit dry, you can always go back and add a little bit of water, just breaking the surface of the water, and then you can add a little bit more black paint. But I'm still holding my brush like a pencil. On the opposite side now of this little indented V on his armor, we're going to add the letter Y. So on the opposite side, I'm going to draw the letter Y. And these are the same marks that are found on the minifig. So my brush is getting a little bit dry, it's warm where I'm at. So I'm going to put the letter Y. Right next to that is going to be a line coming down in the opposite direction as the ones over here. And then another one beside that. And then the last shape that we're going to make is going to be right where this turn is right here. It's going to be the letter A, but without crossing the letter A or an upside down letter B. Right there. And these are all of the folds of the material, kind of where the cape is tucked in to this armor. So let's talk about the armor. So now our armor looks pretty plain. It's just a plain piece of silver. So coming right down from the inside of this V, we're going to draw 2 straight lines. We're not looking for perfectly straight lines. The armor's been through some battles, so we don't want it to be too perfect. So on either side, just really quickly, I'm going to add 2 lines coming down. And this is going to give it that 3D dimensional look. I'm going to take my canvas and I'm going to turn it to the side. If I come down from this dark gray all the way across, we've got an indent our line in his helmet. So I'm going to show you how easy this is to do, so don't panic. I'm going to start with a little bit of water on the end of my brush. I'm going to dip the end of it into the black paint. And I'm going to hold my brush just like a pencil. When I move my brush across the canvas, I'm going to use short marks, or what we call a broken line, almost like a dash mark. So I'm going to go dash, 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 all the way across from one side to the other to make a broken line. So remember, he's been in battle. His line going all the way across his helmet isn't a perfectly ruler straight line. So this little dash mark is going to give the illusion that his helmet is three-dimensional, that he's been through a little bit of battle. So I'm going to start up at the top and going back and forth, making that little dashed line. I'm going to move from one side straight to the other. But I did turn my canvas to help me get from one side to the other in a little bit more of a straight line, because I do want to try to make it go from one side to the other instead of kind of veering off to the side. And then I can go back if I want to go back over it a second time and make it a little bit thicker. But I'm holding my brush just like a pencil because it's a little bit easier to control. There we go. So I'll turn in the right side up again. Great job. So now he's got his black in. We've done his shoulders, his chest plate, the folds from his cape, and the line across his helmet. So let's go ahead and rinse this out, and then we will add some lighter highlights. Okay, same round brush, and same idea that we did with the black. I'm going to break the surface of the water, grab a little bit of the light gray paint. I'm going to hold my brush like a pencil, and we want to make sure that our painting has dried, that our black has dried, and that our dark gray has dried. So the first mark that I'm going to make is right along his cape line. I'm going to follow the curve of his cape line, and I'm going to give him that white highlight that follows the curve of the cape line right here, and then I'm going to come right on the other side and give him a curve on the other side. I'm going to use the same brush. I'm not going to add any more paint to it because I want this line to be a little bit more faint, a little less paint. And I'm going to follow the line right here, right underneath the helmet where the neck is. And I'm going to define where his helmet and his neck meet. And I'm not going to go quite all the way across. I'm going to come about 3/4 of the way, and I'm going to leave a little bit of black showing. And then I'm going to come down the side of his neck a little bit. So now I've defined where his neck is, and I've helped that area to become a little bit more three-dimensional. Up at the top of his weapon, I'm going to make a little curve that follows the top of his weapon and highlights that area as well. So great job, your Mandalorian's done. So now let's add our moons in the background and finish your painting. So I'm going to rinse this out so you can save this brush and paint with it later. I'm going to jump over to our amazing little square brush, one of my favorite brushes to paint with. And I'm going to go straight over to the gold paint. So what I'm going to end up doing is I'm going to grab some gold paint, and in order to make these circles on the canvas, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my brush onto the canvas, and then I turn them in the shape of a circle, And you can hear that scratch on the canvas. I'm going to make that circle shape until all of the paint has disappeared on the paintbrush. So I'm going to take my brush, I'm going to go straight into the gold paint, and I'm going to tap some gold paint onto my brush. Now I gave you a foam plate with your packaging. So what I would recommend is grab a little bit of gold paint from your container and then tap it onto your plate. So you've got a little bit of gold paint at the end of your brush. So I'm going to put my first smaller moon about right here on my painting. I'm going to go straight up and down with the brush. I'm going to swirl in a circle until the brush becomes dry. And you can hear the brush scratch against the back of the canvas. And then I lift off the canvas and I've got my first moon. In this particular scene, in the background sky, there were 2 moons. So I'm going to come back in the same way. I'm going to grab some gold paint. I'm going to tap it off on that little foam dish. So I've got paint. I'm going to come up to a higher section on this painting so they're a little bit offset. And I'm going to scrub in a larger circle. The entire time my brush stays on the canvas and I never lift my brush off the canvas. You can hear it really scratch against the back of the canvas because I'm pushing down really hard. So as these start to dry, you can always come back and you can add a little bit more gold to the center. And you can darken up these moons if you'd like to, which is really, really kind of a fun thing to do. Well, congratulations on your painting. Don't forget that you can sign your painting at the bottom. One of the ways that I love to sign my painting is just using a Sharpie marker. It's fun, easy. Sometimes putting your initials in paint can get a little messy. So Sharpie marker works really good, and I hope you paint again with me. Thank you so much, and I hope that you enjoy your creation. Have a wonderful day.